All right, guys, I just want to review the internal anatomy of the kidney really quick, and then I want to talk about these little microscopic structures right here, okay, that are actually going to be responsible for forming your urine. All right, and so let's just review. All right, first things first, renal hilum is going to be this area right here, okay, and this looks like it means little hill. All right, and it's going to be your entry for your renal artery, your renal vein, and your ureter into the kidney. Okay. So again, if you want to follow along and take notes with your note packet, all right, just one more way of reinforcing this. Next, we talked about the outer portion, the renal capsule, that sort of lines the outside. We can, again, call that like a visceral membrane. Okay. And then we made a little chart. We broke up, actually we can break up, and let's make a little chart now, cortex, medulla, and sinus, all right? And there are these three main regions. All right, so let's move on. Let's start with the cortex. The cortex is going to be made up of this region all the way here, right? Including the light shaded brown areas in between the pyramids, which is called the columns. So now we have columns and cortex, all right, make up the cortex, all right. Those columns, the major function is they're just going to be separating the pyramids. All right, now we have the medulla, which is essentially this darker portion on the inside. Well, I guess I shouldn't do that. Go like this to this, okay? The medulla is made up then of pyramids, right? Within the pyramids, we have the apex, all right? And that's gonna collect the urine that is formed inside that guy, all right? The last region we have is the renal sinus, made up of the minor calyces. So those guys. This guy. Right? And there is about 8 to 18 per kidney, depending upon how big the kidney is. So bigger people will have more pyramids, thus they'll have more minor calyces. Right? So this is going to receive the urine from the renal papilla, and it's going to send it to the major calyx or calyces. All right, so the major then, switch to red, will be here and here. All right, and there are going to be about 2 to 3. Right, and so I would say about 3 to 5 minor calyces will drain into one major. Okay. And then lastly, in the center here, you have your renal pelvis, which is going to collect all the urine from the major and send it out the ureter to the bladder. Okay, so those are our three regions and our main structures that we just talked about. The only other thing that we mentioned is you have your renal artery and your renal vein here, right, which is how the blood is going to get through. And so remember, see all these little vessels here? These are all the arteries and the veins that are wrapped around each of these pyramids and within the cortex, and they're only removed in this picture so that you could see the anatomy of the kidney a little bit clearer. Okay, so I think it's time for us to move on to the nephron and the microscopic anatomy where the actual urine is formed. Okay, so if you want to open up your exercise 36 packets to this picture that you guys should have labeled by reading the descriptions inside the packet. I have two pictures here, one on the renal tubule of cortical nephron, right? And then you have renal corpuscle and vasculature of the renal tubule. All right, so lots of words here, okay? And we'll kind of get to the bottom of that. But before we do so, The only thing that is different about this picture and this picture is this one has all the blood vessels, okay? So this is going to just include the blood vessels, and this is going to have blood vessels removed, just so that you can see the anatomy a little bit clearer, okay? All right, so let's start over here and let's start looking at the structure, all right, number one, that kind of surrounds the blood, all right? And so first of all, I'm going to say that the yellow part is the nephron. The nephron is going to be the functional unit of the kidney, which forms urine by filtering blood. Okay, so the blood is coming in, all right, kind of like right in here, and it's going to get filtered into number one, which is going to be called the glomerular capsule, right? Also called Bowman's capsule, okay? I like to say Bowman's capsule only because I think it gets to be a little bit of a tongue twister, right? Then we have the first part of our nephron, all right, that is going to do some reabsorbing of substances, and this is going to be our proximal convoluted tubule. So I'm just going to go ahead and say PCT, proximal convoluted tubule. Okay, and then we have our loop of Henle. So this whole thing here is going to be the loop of Henle. All right, and so the two parts, there's one that goes down and one that goes up. So then the one that goes up would be our ascending limb loop of Henle. And then number 4 would be our descending limb loop of Henle. All right, and if you see here, there's this dotted line. Okay, so what that dotted line represents is that everything above the dotted line, this is going to be the renal cortex. This is where we are inside the kidney, right? And underneath the dotted line is going to be our renal medulla. Okay, so like if I were to ask you what structures are part of the renal cortex, you could tell me that right now the Bowman's capsule and the proximal convoluted tubule are, and then part of the loop of Henle are all in the cortex. All right, the distal part of the loop is in the medulla. Okay. All right, then we move on to number 5, which is going to be our DCT, or distal, because it's farther away from the glomerulus. So this proximal one, right? Proximal is, so PCT closer to glomerulus. DCT is distal, okay? And then number 6 is going to be our collecting duct. And number 7 is our papillary duct, because right here is where it connects to our renal papillae of pyramids. And now urine can then drain into the calyces. So we'll make a pathway of blood after this, or pathway of urine after this. All right, now here's the tricky part. We got to add in all of the structures that we see on this side. So number 8 is going to be something that we didn't label over here. That's going to be the blood in the center. All right, and the blood in the center is going to be where the filtration occurs. So that any blood that comes in here is going to get filtered, and this is called the glomerulus. Okay, so this is a tuft of capillaries. Okay, number 9 is going to be what we filter into, and so we're going to call that the glomerular capsule again, or Bowman's capsule. All right, the two of them together, all right, are going to be making up what we'll call the renal corpuscle. Okay, so 8 and 9 equals 10. Okay, and then we see number 10, we see all these capillaries that surround, sorry, number 11, we see all these capillaries that surround the nephron, and this is going to be how we get substances either out of the blood or back into the blood if we want to keep them. And so these are called peritubular. So remember, peri means around the tubule. Peritubular capillaries. All right, and then 12 and 13 are going to be our afferent and efferent arterial. So look, if you look in, all right, we have a couple different ones. All right, number 13 is going to enter. Okay, it's approaching the glomerulus. So 13 approaches the glomerulus. So that's going to be approach means it must be afferent. Because remember, afferent approaches. And then efferent exits. So 13 must, oh wait, I mixed them up again. I wasn't looking. My apologies. All right, 13 should be afferent. And efferent exits arterial. All right, so this is the structure of the nephron, and the next step is to figure out, well, how do we form urine inside this area?